Yeah, should I start now?
Yes, I'll tell you. Just a second. Yeah, you can start. Share and start.
Okay.
Please. Yeah, thank you for all the people for joining.
Am I audible to everyone? And is the screen visible to everyone?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shobhit, and today I'll be presenting our work on can inductive invariance be used to enhance efficiency of bounded model checking with a case study on the RAF consensus protocol. So this project was done in collaboration with ShauryamShobhitMS under the guidance of Professor M. Praveen and Professor M. K. Srivas. Right. So in this presentation, I'll walk you through the motivation for our work, goals, contributions, and some preliminaries on model checking. And then I'll explain the raft consensus protocol, which we have applied this technique on. And after that, Shaurya will take over to explain how we modeled draft, what bugs we targeted, and what experimental results we got. But before that, I wanted to look at this toy example. And this toy example does a very simple thing. It just implements a left shift operation on an array of 8 integers. So the correct implementation shifts the values to the left and copies V0 to V7, so like this. But we have deliberately injected a bug in this, so which means that V7 can either take the value of V0, which ideally it should, or it can retain the value of V7 as it is. Then we have an invariant that we want to check is that after every 8 shifts, do the variables retain their original value or not? The LTL property specifies that whenever V0 is 0 globally, the next value that V0 takes should be 1. Right. And here's a visual representation of how the bug manifests. The arrow shows the trace where the incorrect. So you can see here it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And ideally it should go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Can you just show me the invariant one? Sorry.
Right, yeah.
Why should the next value be 1?
If it's correct, if the program is correct, then V0 should be rotated, and then the next value that V0 should take is 1, right? So
no. What if originally you had all zeros? Then sorry.
So originally,
originally, yeah. Our init is that it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have initialized our init as vk equals to k.
Okay.
Yeah. So here's the visual trace of the program, and as you can see, after a series of shift, we end up with one of the paths ends up with the correct how it should have been, but all these other paths they end up with something that we don't want because they retained the value of V7 at some point in the next step. Right. So how do we catch a bug like this? There are 3 basic techniques to catch a bug like this. One is symbolic model checking, bounded model checking, and k-induction. Symbolic model checking can find all bugs but suffers from state explosion. Bounded model checking is fast for shallow bugs but requires a specific bound. And k-induction can provide full proofs if k is small enough. So our focus is on combining BMC with some auxiliary invariants to improve the efficiency of BMC. Right. So let's quickly compare the verification techniques. So like I said, SMC finds all bugs, but there's a state blow up. BMC is good for shallow bugs, but the K should be greater than the bug depth. Otherwise, it can't find that bug. And K induction gives a full proof if it's a small K for larger K and for long invariance. Yeah, for the downside is that you need a very large K for long invariance. And the technique that we propose is using BMC with invariants, which should cut runtime. But the downside is that we have to come up with crafty invariants to figure out what properties to violate and what not to. Right. So the core idea is to inject auxiliary invariants that help guide the verification. These invariants will act as tripwires. The solver may hit one of the counterexamples sooner, leading to a smaller unbind bound and a reduced runtime. So if one or more invariants fail, safety is likely to fail as well. So mathematically, we are looking at invariants in 1 to inv m such that each invariant implies safety property. This way, a violation of any single invariant is a potential safety issue. Right. So recapping the model, seeing the model again, the one thing that we wanted to check is that after every 8 rotations, do they reset? Do the values reset? So if we add a auxiliary invariant such that, let's say, all at every single state, like all V0, V1, V2, V3, V4, V7, all of them should have distinct values. If that's the invariant that we have, then if you go back to the trace, it should like trip right here instead of actually going through all of the k depth and then figuring out whether it'll take 8 n steps or not. Right here, it should be like, oh, this invariant fails, and that's why the safety property should eventually fail. Right. So our goals and contributions. So our main goal is to apply inductive invariant.
I just one moment. Yeah, if people have any questions, they can feel free to raise their hand. And
so, sir, I have a question. So,
yeah.
So these invariants are not they are not necessarily like all those invariants in Hoare logic or whatever, where your aim is to prove some end goal. This is to catch some trips, is it?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
For instance, this auxiliary invariant doesn't necessarily imply that after 8 steps it resets. But this is a bad behavior that will.
Right. If this auxiliary invariant fails, it's very likely that the safety invariant will fail. That's how we are trying to craft the invariant. So
So what I mean is the other thing, that ensuring this auxiliary invariant doesn't ensure the must reset after 8 steps property, but still you want to see if you want to catch certain wrong behaviors early, so you add this invariant anyway should hold, so you are adding it. Can we understand it like that?
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, right. So our first contribution is to get an abstract model of the Raft's leader election protocol. I'll come to what Raft is. And we aimed for a balanced abstraction, detailed enough to capture the election logic, but abstract enough to be tractable in model checkers like NUSMV and BMC. And we've used non-determinism, a lot of non-determinism, to model message delays, losses, avoid explicit state explosion. Right. The second contribution focuses on safety property and inductive invariance. The target safety property is that ensuring one leader per term. So this was the safety property that we had to prove. And for that, we crafted some tripwires as inductive invariants, which were unique quorum, unique vote, and leader uniqueness. So unique quorum means that there can be only one node with majority of votes. Unique vote means that a voter grants at most one vote per term. And leader uniqueness means that if there are 2 nodes and they're leaders, they think that they're leaders, their term should always be different. The third contribution are the experiments that we did. So we verified that the correct model with no counterexamples of the leader action protocol. Then we injected a bug by dropping this unique vote rule. And then we experimented on this buggy model on how we can try to find it, how efficiently can we find the bug. So BMC alone finds the safety violation after a deep unwind. But these invariants, BMC plus invariants, finds the violation within a few steps. Yeah.
Shobhit,
yes.
I think you're fading in and out.
Is it audible to everyone else?
Yeah. I can hear you clearly.
Oh, okay. Is it I don't know, is it any better? Like, I'm not even using headphones, so I think it should be okay. Should I go ahead?
So, Sriva sir?
Yes, there is some problem that I don't know what happened. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I'm perfectly able to.
Yeah, we are able to hear you. I'm able to hear Shobhit also.
Yeah, something happened. I think we temporarily got disconnected. Can you start with contribution 3, please? Yeah?
Right. Okay.
That's
so
slide.
For a third contribution, we verified the correct model of the raft leader election protocol with no counterexamples. Then we made a faulty model intentionally by dropping the unique vote rule. And then we experimented on the faulty model. That was the majority of the project. Then first we ran BMC alone on the model. We find that it finds the safety, it finds the bug, but after a deep unwind. BMC plus invariants finds the violation within a few steps. And then we have also used k-induction to constrain the inbox that we'll see later how. And then we collected a lot of metrics such as how many SAT calls we are making, what are the max K needed, and what was the wall clock time for all of these experiments that we'll present later in the presentation. But before that, a few preliminaries. So I've been talking about model checking, BMC, and k-induction, but I will explain them formally. So here I'll explain them. So model checking is an automated technique to verify whether a system satisfies a temporal logic specification or a CTL specification. The system is modeled as a transition system with states, initial states, and transition relations. And formally, we represent it as MSIT. This states, initial state, and then transition relation. And there are two sorts of model checking. One is BMC, bounded model checking, and another is symbolic model checking. So symbolic model checking, what it does is that it encodes the states and transitions as a Boolean in a Boolean form, and then it uses binary decision diagrams to represent the initial states and the transitions. Then it explores the full reachable state space. But since it explores a full reachable state space, it can prove all properties over, but it suffers from a blow up. So there can be a lot of states, it suffers from blow up. Whereas bounded model checking, which is a newer technique, what it does is that it only unrolls the system up to K depth and then tries to search for the counterexample in those K depths. And then it encodes the problem as a SAT SMT formula. It is efficient for bug finding, but it is incomplete since we are only unrolling till depth K. So if there is any bug that manifests in K depth unrolling, it can find that, but anything after K, it can't say anything about it. So it's not a full proof of anything, right? So BMC works by constructing a logical formula that encodes the initial state, the transition relations up to the bound K, and the negation of a desired property. It ships this formula to a SAT solver, something like Z3. And then if this formula is satisfiable, a counterexample exists within K steps. If it is unsatisfiable, no violation exists within the bound, but we cannot conclude anything about beyond that bound. Is this fine with everyone? Have they understood the formula?
Any questions? Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay.
Can't even see with.
Now I'll come to k-induction.
There's a question you'll have to speak up or put something in the chat.
I can't read chat, so yeah.
No, I'll read chat.
Okay.
I'll take care of that. I was just announcing.
Sure. Yeah. Now I'll come to k-induction. So we know what a standard induction is. A standard induction proves the property in all reachable states by showing that it holds in the initial state and then it preserved by the transitions. K-induction extends this by proving a property holds over a sequence of K transitions, which can be more powerful when property is not directly inductive, right? So it'll see a series of K transitions where the property holds, and then they say that for K plus 1 also it holds, right? So k-induction assumes that the property holds for K steps and then checks if it holds for step K plus 1. However, it does not require that the initial state in the sequence to be reachable. So it proves the property over a superset of the reachable traces. However, if the property holds over this over approximation, it must hold on the actual reachable states, right? So as we increase K, we get a stronger inductive hypothesis and tighter approximation of the reachable states. So yeah. Is that okay? Should I go ahead? Because I'm now going to explaining what raft is.
So why do you say as you increase K, it is a stronger induction thing? I would have thought that if your usual induction is one induction, no? It says that
right.
Yeah. So as you increase K, it's only a weaker induction, right? So I don't understand. So
no, but suppose there are like a lot of states like this, right? A one induction property would prove that for any state, if it holds and it's preserved by the transition, then for this also it's true. But
so you're saying that as you increase K, it is more likely to prove the K induction principle. Is that what you say?
I'm saying that as we increase K, the set of reachable states become less, right? Because okay, so if it's one induction, there can be a lot of states that follow that. There can be a lot of states that have property P true. But then for K induction, we have to have a series of K states for which this is true. And then for K plus 1th, we are proving this thing.
Yeah, but that is a prerequisite. No, you're just saying that if so can you just go back to the thing, the K induction?
Yeah. Yes.
If that's a stronger assumption you are making, no? So the principle itself is weaker, right? So so maybe it is that it's easier to prove K induction because you are assuming more stuff, right?
But if something is one inductive,
it will also be K inductive.
Necessarily be 2 inductive, 3 inductive.
Yeah, that's what. So one inductive is stronger. That's what I'm saying. So when you say you want to increase K, it is not because you want a stronger thing, but maybe because you will be able to prove more.
Prove it
something
much
weaker.
Yes.
You're able to prove more stuff, but this suffices for your purpose, then you can use K induction instead of one induction. I assume
that's correct. So, I guess what he meant was that the precondition, the induction hypothesis is stronger.
We get a stronger induction hypothesis.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Right. Yeah. So when the K is very large, we can get more spurious counterexamples. For example, we can get counterexamples in states that are not even reachable. But as we so the larger the K is, the less the reachable state, like the tighter we have a bound on the reachable states, the more spurious examples get eliminated. Counterexamples got eliminated. Yeah. Spurious counterexample is something that is a bug, but it's not a reachable bug. It's right. Now I'll explain what raft is. So before that, what is a distributed consensus? Because raft is a distributed consensus protocol. It aims to solve distributed consensus. So distributed consensus ensures that multiple nodes in a distributed system agree on a common value despite failures. So challenges include, like, there can be network partitions, node failures, and then message delays, message drops, and even after all of that, we have to maintain consistency between over like what the value of the variables is among all the servers. And it is used in a lot of places. It is used in Zookeeper, Kubernetes, and all. They use distributed consensus. So Raft is a consensus algorithm designed to be understandable, consistent, and fault tolerant. That was their main selling point. And then it ensures that distributed state machines apply the same sequence of command even with failures, though it doesn't protect against Byzantine failures. So there are mostly two sort of failures that can happen in a server. One is that a network delay, network drop, server crashes. Another is that a malicious party has somehow hacked into a server and changed the messages. Those are called Byzantine failures. So it does not protect against Byzantine failures, but it does protect against whatever we talked about, like network crashes, network death, server crashes. Yeah. So Raft decomposes the consensus into 3 sub-problems: leader election, log replication, and safety. So every change to the system goes through the leader, and every node in the server can be one of these 3 states. It can either be a leader. A leader is one which sends all the logs from a client to the other to the followers. A follower is something that replicates those logs. It's a passive state. And candidate is something temporary state between a follower and a leader. It is how a follower becomes a leader. Right? So I'll give you an overview of the election process. So there's so everyone starts up as a follower. They time out, which means that they haven't heard from the leader for a while. They become a candidate. They ask for votes from fellow servers. And once they get majority of votes, they become a leader. And then if leader discovers a server with a higher term, which I'll come to what it is, it again becomes a follower. A term, we can just think of it as like a more updated server. It becomes a follower. And yeah, and it just keeps going on again and again. And this Raft protocol, this guarantees that there are only unique leader per term, which the term is election safety. And this is the property that we want to verify. Right. So what is a term? So RAF divides its operations into phases, with each normal operation phase beginning with an election. Each node keeps a local counter called term, which increases monotonically, and it helps detect stale leaders. And if a server sees a higher term, it updates its current term and becomes a follower. So yeah. And then how to trigger election? So how does a follower become a leader? So a follower becomes a leader after an election timeouts, and then after it times out, that means it hasn't heard from a leader in some time. It increments the current term, becomes the candidate, votes for itself, and sends these vote requests to all the other servers. And then once it gets majority of votes, it'll become leader. Right. So what does it send in these vote requests? In this vote request, it sends its current term, the candidate ID of the server asking for vote, and its last logs. And the vote is only granted by some server to this candidate if the term that the server receives is at least as big as its own term. This server is not voted for anyone in this term, any server, and the logs are up to date according to this server. If the logs are at least as up to date as this server's logs, then in all these three properties pass, then they grant the vote. And then on majority, that there are n by 2, more than n by 2 votes, the candidate becomes a leader. Right. So maybe I'll show a small video which might make things. But so currently there are no followers.
Yeah, let me ask, maybe in the interest of time.
Okay.
How long will this animation take?
It's a 40-second one. I don't think it'll take.
I think there is a hard stop at 3 o'clock. I mean, you started 5 minutes late, so till 3:05. For the rest of you, but the benefit of the audience, it's a 1 hour, a planned 1 hour presentation. Okay, with question and answer. So go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So currently every server is a follower, and you can see that there's this gray timeout bar that is going, and it's different for everyone. So these are called, which we call, what are the timeouts of the server, and this can be randomly decided. And these are running down because they're not hearing from the leader. So you can see the S1's timeout runs out first, and then it becomes the leader. And then after it becomes the leader, it starts sending these logs to all the other leaders. They start replicating it. And then soon enough, this server dies down. So server 1, which became the leader, it dies down. And then none of these nodes are hearing from server 1. So you can see S5 now will time out first because it's not hearing from any leader, and it'll become the leader itself. It'll start, right? And suppose S5 also dies down. So S2 will become, right, S2 will become leader. So S1 you can see died out in term 2, S5 died out in term 3, whereas the latest term that is happening right now in the whole all of nodes is 4. And then let's say S1 comes back. When S1 comes back, it'll receive this log from S2, and then when it receives something of term 4, it'll update its current term to 4, and it'll step down as a leader because it died as a leader to a follower, and it'll start accepting things. And same thing will happen with S5, that will, yeah.
So when S1 comes back up,
yeah, go ahead, please.
When S1 comes back up, both S1 and S2 think they are leaders, but S1 is a leader for a smaller term. That is
right. S1 is a leader in term 2, but S2 is a leader in term 4. And whenever a leader sees a message of a higher term, it changes.
It will become a follower. Okay.
Yeah, it becomes a follower. Right. Right. So again, one second. So election can have 3 outcomes. If it gets a majority, it obviously wins. It can lose an election, quote unquote lose, if it sees a message with a higher term, which means it'll step down. And there can also be split votes. So if it happens when there are 2 candidates simultaneously, and then when this happens, then we just increment the term and retry the election again. But however, we try to reduce these split votes by giving randomized election timeouts. So at the start, you could have seen that S1 was the one that timed out first because
How
it had
does the candidate know that someone else has also gotten the same number of votes?
both of them.
You say
How
what
does
triggers the time?
No, I mean, you can only get a majority, only one person get a majority, right? If there are like 10 servers, they get 5 and 5, they need at least 6 to, they need at least 6 to become a leader.
Okay. Before you can.
So it's not about most votes, it's about the
But
majority.
what do you mean by no majority due to simultaneous candidates?
So because they can get like, if it's there like 10 servers, one server gets 5 votes, other server gets 5 votes, none of them have majority. Because they
Okay.
need
So
at
then
least 6.
it's not, okay, nobody is a majority. So,
Yeah.
okay. So nobody has been elected as a leader. So they will both time out and
Yeah,
delete, right?
no, right, yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry for interrupting.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So the paper claims that if there are only one vote per server per term and leader require a majority, so the followers require a majority to become a leader and the majority is unique, this will imply that there will only be one leader per term. And this is exactly the property that we want to check, that no leader in same term is possible. Because all of the protocol depends on this election safety property. Yeah, I think
we can
this is
skip
fine.
this slide, this animation.
Right,
Done that, we can skip this slide. Okay, and so
Yeah.
you could.
So our objectives were to create a model for the leader election protocol and prove the correctness using k-induction, and then inject a deduplication bug, which means that a servers recount the same votes from another server. So a server, which is a candidate, suppose, and some other server S1 has granted it vote, even though the vote has only been granted once, it can recount the vote and then it can get a false majority. So we injected this bug in the model and we try to catch it efficiently using bounded model checking. Right. No, so now I'll hand it over to Shauryam to explain further.
Yeah, at this point, in this pause before Shauryam takes over, any questions from the audience?
1 second, let me just.
Yeah, this was good. I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
Is my screen visible?
Yes,
Yes.
it is visible.
Please.
Okay.
Models
Thank you,
with different
Shobhit. I'll start the rest of the presentation. So models with different levels of abstraction. 1 second. So the key question we addressed was, what is a reasonable abstract model that allows invariance proof for an abstract model to expedite BMC at a concrete implementation level? So going through different levels, this took us about 50% of the entire research time to determine. So this is the most basic diagram for the network, showing how nodes communicate through a central network component. This is literally the most basic representation, but as we'll see, we developed several levels of abstraction to expedite BMC and also to inject bugs easier. So we'll talk about level 1 abstraction. We started with a very, very simple, highly non-deterministic model. The model includes role, process ID, terms, and state. The initial state has all nodes as follows, and with term 1, roles can be follower, candidate, leader. Process ID is just telling the ID of the node. Terms is just positive integers that will determine the term and they keep increasing. And state is a mapping from the process ID to a tuple that says its role and its term. So the transition relation and LEP here are defined very simply. The leader election protocol states that if two nodes are leaders, they must be in different terms. And in our transition relation, we explicitly enforce LEP and ensure that the terms are non-decreasing. Thus, every reachable state here satisfies LEP by construction, since the transition relation only allows those valid states where the safety property LEP holds. And therefore, this model is correct by construction instead of checking through some model checking software. So a level 2 model abstracts away network and messages, but retains states like roles, terms, and votes to enable safety proofs. It includes new components like quorum flag and vote tracking. So I'll go through the components of this model. So roles, just like before, can take the 3 possible states: follower, candidate, or leader. Process ID is the same, terms is the same. Quorum is a new Boolean flag indicating whether a node has received a majority of votes or not. Votes is just a tracker to see how many votes the current node we're talking about has received. And state, again, is a mapping from the process ID to every relevant information it has. So here also we define LP as no two states can be leaders in the same term, and leader must have a quorum. And supporting invariants that we crafted were unique queue that says at most one node has quorum, majority queue, a node has quorum only if it has received a majority of votes, and unique vote, no double voting in a term. So if someone has voted for two different, someone can't vote for two different nodes in a term. So the transition system here is again defined by the predicates we defined before. The transition system specifies the initial state where all nodes are followers with term 1 and no votes. The transition enforces rules like terms never decrease, candidates with quorum becoming leaders, the quorum rule requiring a majority vote, and the unique vote rule. So using all this, we use existential abstraction where concrete system refines an abstract system if every concrete transition maps to an abstract transition. So this ensures every concrete trace is represented in our abstract model. The refinement conditions include initialization, simulation, and conformance. Initialization ensures the abstract initial state includes all possible concrete initial states. Simulation guarantees that concrete transitions can be mapped to abstract transitions. Confirmation verifies that concrete state, the sequence is also uh, can be also mapped to an abstract sequence. So a criteria for a good abstract model would be that this is subjectively defined by us, that it has sufficient state information to exhibit our safety violations and to inject our inductive invariance. That an abstraction that doesn't exclude correct implementation behavior. We would like the safety property to be non-inductive, and simplicity to ease verification effort either by BMC or by k-induction. So we move on to level 3. While level 2 abstraction was useful for our conceptual understanding, it wasn't detailed enough to model the specific bugs we wanted to target, especially the duplicated vote bug that will come next. This made us to develop a more concrete model with explicit message handling and network behavior. Our most concrete model represents Raft as a distributed system with nodes and a message queue. Message include.
If I may interject here, I guess there's one point that you missed, which I wanted to add. You did prove that the level 2 was a refinement of that simple level 1, correct?
Yes,
So
sir.
that, yeah, that is something that you should mention, okay? That you did prove that level 2 was a refinement level 1, which showed that the inductive invariance is sufficient to guarantee
the LEP safety.
safety property. And now you're developing level 3, more
To
detailed.
inject bugs. Yeah.
Okay, please. Yeah. I just wanted to add that because you missed that point. Yeah.
So level 3 now has inboxes and outboxes, which have message types. Message type include a payload, sender's term, the message type, and the receiver's name. These messages are handled by the network, which can delay or drop messages arbitrarily, but fairly, as in no one gets any bias towards not getting dropped or not getting delayed. So each node now has local states like term, role, log, voted for, timeout, votes received, inbox, and an outbox. Node behavior is defined by transition rules reacting to inbox messages and timeouts. So the network diagram for level 3 looks something like this. So this visualizes the network structures with the nodes, inboxes, and outboxes, showing how messages flow between nodes through the network. The network model at this level is very complicated, with having multiple message types, queues, and non-deterministic delivery. The complexity here makes the BMC struggle to complete the verification in a reasonable time frame. Because firstly of the state explosion, and because for a smaller state size we now have bunch of variables indicating the inbox and outbox. So we want another model that looks quite like this but gives us an easier time in injecting the bug as well as having enough information. So now we get to level 2.5, our working model. So in our working model, we remove the explicit network module. Instead of modeling message queues explicitly, messages are generated non-deterministically and placed directly in the node inboxes, with the inbox sizes exactly 1. We don't have any more messages than 1. We don't have a queue. And at each transition, a node is selected, a valid message is generated, and based on the current system state, the node processes it. So how does the message generation flow look like? So arbitrarily choose a node n, generate a valid message m in this node's inbox, process the message, update whatever state variables have to be updated, and then keep repeating it. So here the nodes have states such as term, role, voted for, which is just an indication of which process ID did my node vote for, and votes received. This is an array where the jth index will say how many votes did the node j send to me. This can have duplicates, but we have a way to circumvent that. And we also have a global variable called term, which is the maximum of all the terms, which helps us in implementing the entire thing. So the message has a simpler schema than before. It has a message type which can be heartbeat, vote request, or vote grant. It also has the sender's name to make it easier for voting, and the sender's term. Then we do not have any explicit queuing or delivery delays. We already talked about this. So now the network diagram looks something like this. So removing the central network component, we only focus on the inbox, and this makes our BMC have a very easy time trying to look for violations. So the most important thing here would be that we are required to get this model to find the correct constraints on the inbox. We can't have spurious messages that cannot realistically be seen in the inbox. So to do this, we've described the method in this flowchart. So we refine the constraint on the inbox through an iterative process. We firstly run the model. When our property fails, checking through k induction or something else like that, we see the trace, and the trace analysis got a little easier once we removed all the for loops in our code. And we analyze the trace and understand why this message was spurious, why this message should not be existing in our current nodes inbox. After that, we add special constraints to stop this spurious case from happening. And we keep doing this until our model shows no counterexamples on a bug-free model. After we're done with that, we have a correct implementation of a level 2.5 working model. So apart from this, we have certain rules for all the follower, candidate, and leader transitions. So when a follower times out and gets no message, then it becomes a candidate, increments its term, votes for itself, and then resets everything else. If it receives a vote request, it resets its timeout. Then it updates voted for if it sees that it should. Heartbeat, if it receives a heartbeat with a valid term, then it resets a timeout, update the term, all that. Similarly, we have candidate state transitions. If vote grant is received, then update the vote counters, become a leader if majority has been reached. If someone else sends a heartbeat, which has a higher term, then it sees that I am stale, so it becomes a follow and resets everything. Similarly, if it receives a vote request from a higher term, it becomes a follower for that and possibly votes for them, and again resets everything. Another thing with leader, the most simple transitions that we have, if it receives a higher term heartbeat or a vote request, it becomes a candidate, updates everything, and clears the inbox. But if it receives a vote grant, it just updates the vote counters it has. Now we can move on to the targeted bugs. So
yeah, this is the right time. So that is the section on models. Modeling part with the level 2.5 being the most detailed one, which you described. Any questions on the modeling part so far before Shauryam moves on to describing the actual verification part? I mean, mainly the bug finding part after injecting
I'm fine. There are no questions from my side.
Okay. So rest of you. Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Sure.
So despite Raft's designed for simplicity and understandability, implementations still has subtle bugs in areas like vote counting, recovery management, term handling, log indexing, and stuff like that. This can arise due to the gap between Raft's conceptual simplicity and the reality and complexity of implementing distributed systems. having all the asynchronous networks, concurrent operations, and dealing with partial failures. Here we focus on the duplicate vote bug, commonly known as RAF45. So the description of RAF45 bug states that candidate accept duplicate votes from the same follower in the same election term, which means a follower might resend votes because it believes that an earlier vote was dropped by the network. Upon receiving the duplicate vote, the candidate counts it as a new vote and steps up to leader before it actually achieved a quorum of votes. So if some voter decided that, oh, my vote might have been lost, they vote again, but the candidate counts those votes as two instead of one. So the duplicate vote bug occurs when candidate accept both the duplicate votes from the same follower, and this can lead to violating leader safety, allowing two leaders to be elected in the same term, which can potentially lead to data inconsistency and different other violations. So how do we model the duplicate votes? We implemented two vote counters in our models. True votes, which counts the number of unique voters, which is the correct behavior, and fake votes, which counts the total votes including the duplicates, which is the buggy behavior. And in CVMC, we can toggle between the two using the compilation flag de-inject duplicate vote bug. So it shifts from using true votes to fake votes, and similarly changing the entire behavior altogether. So we move on to the verification properties. Just like we showed the different properties in level 2, this is how we encoded them in CVMC. We have check safety property, which is our main assertion, where it says no two leaders in the same term. Check leader, which says the leaders must have a quorum of votes. Check unique vote, no nodes votes twice in the same term. Check unique quorum, only one node has majority in same term. We verify LEP via BMC by checking if the concrete transitions imply the negation of the abstract safety property and invariance. So this approach leverages our abstraction to make verification more efficient. The key insight here is that by formally establishing a refinement relation between the abstract and concrete model, we can show that any property proven in the abstract model also holds in the concrete model. This allows us to craft properties easier and invariance at the abstract level, where the reasoning is simpler. Then apply them to the complex concrete model by focusing on the essential state variables that affect leader safety. So this can, on our side, on human understanding, this can drastically reduce the verification complexity. So we check if the concrete transitions imply the negation of the conjunction of LEP and the supporting invariants. If this implication holds, we found a counterexample. Specifically, if we consider the formula written on the screen, where TCS represents the transition in the concrete model, CS0, CS1 representing the concrete states, A as the abstraction function, and the right side containing our different invariants and properties that we want. This approach allows us to find violations in the concrete model that manifest as violations in our abstract invariants. This can be through fewer BMC steps when compared in the abstract and the concrete model. Here are concerned, A is just a simple projection function. So checking the model with CVMC. We use CVMC, commonly known as C bounded model checker. This takes the C programs and unrolls loops to the bounded depth. This converts the whole program into an SSA, then sends it to a SAT or SMT solver and checks for satisfiability. We use the following flags to make our implementation easier to work with. Property main assertion. This targets the specific assertion we want in the code other than the overflow checks and memory leak that CVMC normally does. Trace hex, it outputs the trace if the property is violated and it's a little easier to read. The de-inject duplicate word bug is just including a bug or not. And deuse fix in it is when we try to constrain the inbox, we start with a fix in arbitrary initialization. But when we're trying to look for violations, we use the fix initialization. So this is the CVMC pseudocode. We initialize the state as everyone being a follower and having no votes. We check whatever property we are concerned with right now. We apply the transition, and at each step we assume the property. And after the final transition, we check if the safety property still holds or not. Now we can move on to what experimentation and what results we got. So we have three goals. Goal one.
So any questions about how the properties and the invariants were encoded and how CBMC was used? And he now moves on to the experiment section. Any questions?
I think I'm fine with it. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Go ahead then.
So we had three main goals in our experimentation. Goal one, which was to compare performance of BMC for safety property versus using BMC for the invariants. Goal two, which was to compare performance of vanilla BMC versus invariant aided BMC. Goal three was to compare performance of vanilla BMC versus a constrained search space. We'll go on to what that is. So when experimented, we noticed that we were not getting any violations with n is equal to 3 nodes. And then we noticed with only 3 nodes, the duplicate vote bug cannot cause a safety violation. Because if node A becomes leader with duplicate votes and someone else, such that node B voted twice for them, it already means they had a vote from node A and a vote from node B, which already means they had a legitimate quorum. So we cannot see the deduplication bug when n is equal to 3, which means our minimum required n would be 4. And then we figure out the minimum steps to failure analysis. So instead of going BMC 0, 1, 2, 3 up until a k that does not work out, we figured this out to make our lives easier. So for n is equal to 2x or n is equal to 2x plus 1, we need x plus 1 votes to become the leader. And overall, we need at least 2x plus 4 steps to find a safety violation. The steps go node A, obviously x greater than 2 since n can't be 3. So node A, it times out, becomes a candidate and votes for itself. Node B receives a vote request in its inbox, changes its voted value to A. Then node A, for the next X steps, receives votes from B, reaching X plus 1 votes and becoming the leader. So node A takes X plus 2 steps to become the leader. Similarly, C and D will have the same criteria, where they take X plus 2 steps more and overall 2X plus 4 steps to reach the first violation. So instead of going BMC on 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we can just do 2x plus 3 and 2x plus 4. On the basis of passing and failure, we can conclude that our required k was 2x plus 4. So we'll move on to the results. So goal one, which was performance comparison between BMC for safety properties versus BMC for invariants. So we found that violations of the unique vote and the leader uniqueness invariants were detected much earlier, k is equal to 4 and k is equal to 5, while violations of P, which is our safety property, and UQ, which is a unique quorum property, they both required almost double that number of steps, k is equal to 8.
Yeah,
And
this is for n is equal to how much?
4.
4, okay.
And also we can see the time increase multiple times. Goal 2 was using vanilla BMC versus invariant aided BMC. So instead of just assuming P, the safety property, we also had combinations of different invariants that we talked about. So we found that assuming certain invariants such as UV, unique vote, improved verification time from 210 seconds to 162 seconds. This is a 23% improvement, but we can actually do better. So vanilla BMC versus constrained search space. So what do I mean by a constrained search space? So we saw that UV can fail at k is equal to 4. Now we assume that after step 4, UV is always false. Now using different combinations of L failing, UQ failing, and different combinations of them both failing, them both not failing, all three failing, stuff like that, we ran the experiments and got the relevant information here. So our third experiment shows that using the assumption that UV fails step 4 onwards, this reduces our violation time to 139 seconds compared to 210 seconds and 162 seconds when we had the plain vanilla BMC versus invariant aided BMC. And this is a 34% improvement in runtime. So this is the chart. It has the best runtime for all P plus UV and UV violation after step 4. So we also did some modifications in the code, seeing that a property fails first time at k step, and knowing that it won't fail for 0 to k minus 1, instead of assuming the property at each step, we can just assume the step is true at k minus 1th step. So this keeps the trace as same, but shortens the formula. Theoretically, this should not have a difference, but SAT solver would have an easier time looking through this trace. So instead of going and assuming the property at each step, we just assume the property just before the final transition. So now doing this for n is equal to 3, where k would be 10, we see assuming nothing, all p plus uv and luv, uq, everything, we see that the violation step is the same 10, 10, 10, but the time is drastically different. So the plain one takes around 1333 seconds. Meanwhile, assuming the main inductive invariants that we talked about, LUV and UQ, we see that the violation is reached much earlier, 730 seconds, instead of spending like 21 minutes on just running plain BMC. So the time taken, you can see that it's a 46% improvement based from the basis vanilla BMC by using assumptions at step 9. So throughout our research, our key insights were that violations to the safety.
These are the concluding slides.
Yeah.
So before he moves on to the last few slides where he gives his conclusion and future work, any questions about the experiments section and the tables that Shauryam showed?
I'm fine with it. Yeah, I'm quite fine.
Okay, so you can ask questions later too. So after he's done, please. Yeah, go ahead.
So our key insights here were violations to the safety property are often preceded by violations to helper invariants. Selectively assuming helper properties can guide the model check it efficiently. Injecting violations at specific points can accelerate the discovery for counterexamples. And larger models like n is equal to 6 are more sensitive to which invariants are assumed and when. The key findings were the duplicate vote bug can be successfully detected with BMC. Minimum cluster size to demonstrate this bug is at n is equal to 4. Verification time grows significantly with cluster size, not just because we have a larger cluster, but since we already also need more transitions to get to a violation. And since the model is non-deterministic, even 2 more steps can lead to many more traces. Unique quorum check helps for most of n is equal to 4 safety violations, and for n is equal to 6, over constraining can actually increase verification time, as we saw in L p plus not UV takes more than L plus UV plus UQ. So sometimes formula size also makes a trade-off. So there's a trade-off between the tighter constraint and the formula complexity for the SAT solver. So we conclude that we demonstrated formal verification of raft leader election, successfully modeled and detected the duplicate vote bug, established minimum bound for cluster size and steps required, identified critical invariants for efficient verification, and showed that iterative constraint refinement is effective for debugging. So yeah, I think we're open to any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Shobhit and Shauryam. Very nice presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So these extra invariants that you add, these extra properties that it is, there is no systematic way of coming up with them, is it? It is just that you develop some intuition about the protocol or whatever system you're checking, and then you try to add
Exactly,
these
yeah.
things. Okay.
Yeah.
And
That's what we did.
can you add more and more to?
Yeah, but
see
if I
why-
may interject there, Suresh, okay, that is what, like Shauryam said, that's what they did, okay? But in a, I mean, ideally, if you had a simple model, that's what, I mean, the level 2 model served to prove that the invariants were indeed invariants, and they implied the safety property, okay? Now, that is how that proof was done by model checking, okay? And it could be done by, so in that sense, abstract model, level 2 model is very simplistic, just to take the, I mean, it was constructed by construction for invariance. I mean, you could imagine that you could have a more detailed model than that, and then use the BMC for, I mean, you could have verified those invariants on those, and then used it to verify, more detailed code-like implementation. Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, yes, here the invariants, yes, were done mainly by intuition. That's because they're proofs of Raft. Okay, they relied, Shauryam and Shobhit, relied on their TLA proof.
Okay.
So the invariants were done there, but you could technically, I mean, yeah. So, and then they, their purpose was to show how effectively BMC could be guided using those invariants that have already been proved as on a correct model.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, please re-ask your question if indeed yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's fine.
Okay, so I'd like to thank Professor M.K. Srivas and Professor M. Praveen for helping us guide the project, and Shobhit, of course, for helping me out with everything. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Anyone else in the audience has any question or words of encouragement for Shauryam and Shobhit? And you can say, or you can all clap together if you don't have questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much,
Thank you, everyone.
Shobhit,
Yes.
very good presentation, and thanks for people to encouraging them to be part of the audience.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you. Special thanks to Suresh. Yeah, Professor Suresh.
Sir, I didn't do anything much. So, right. So, I mean, we can all leave, right? Or is there any formality?
No, I mean, if you have more questions, Suresh, that you want to ask.
No, I don't know. Very nice work. Yeah, I just like once the reports are ready, then I would like to just go through that.
That they will do.
Just to get a little more of the details, but yeah.
This Ketaki Sahasra Buddhe thanks Shauryam and Shobhit in the chat message. Okay.
Thank you, Ketaki.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye. Bye.
Okay. So thank you, Shobhit and Shauryam. And we'll be in touch. Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
Very good.